Hi, I'm Dianna Cohen. I'm co-founder and CEO of Plastic Pollution Coalition. Plastic Pollution Coalition is a global alliance of more than 1,200 organizations, businesses, and thought leaders worldwide working towards a more just, equitable world free of plastic pollution and its toxic impact on humans, animals, the ocean and waterways, and the environment. My journey with Plastic Pollution Coalition started more than a decade ago. As a visual artist working with plastics as my primary material for the last 30 years, I deconstruct various found and retrieved plastic bags and plastic bits and reform them and reconstitute them into 2- and 3-dimensional pieces and sculptural pieces and installations. And in working with this material for so long, and in doing so, I became familiar with the material and came to understand it in a way without really understanding what it was made out of yet. As a Southern Californian love of the ocean, I grew up here in Los Angeles, spending time in Santa Monica and in Venice Beach, body surfing, swimming in the water, riding my skates at the beach. And in the course of my life, between growing up here and then also having the opportunity to travel to different parts of the world, I began to notice more and more plastic and single-use plastic in the water around me. So I do what anybody would do. Anybody who's conscious and cares, I would grab it, pick it up, tie it to my bathing suit, tuck it in the edge of my bikini, bring it out, look for a garbage can or a recycling container, put it there, and then, believe, like we all believe, that it was recycled. Around 2007, I began to hear about a massive amount of plastic that was gathering somewhere out in the Pacific Ocean, and I spent time trying to learn more about it, but in 2008, I created a proposal to go out to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with the idea of harvesting this plastic island, chipping it, cold molding it, making bricks out of it, and making art out of it, and using it with the intention to raise awareness about what was happening out in the ocean and that there was a plastic pollution crisis occurring there. It wasn't until I spoke to experts like Captain Charlie Moore that the reality of the problem truly began to set in for me, and I began to understand that the so-called Great Pacific Garbage Patch, in fact, was not an island. It was more like a plastic smog in the water, spread out throughout the water strata, not just on the surface. In fact, 8 million metric tons of plastic enter the ocean annually, and large amounts of it are consumed by marine life at all levels of the food chain, and thus potentially also consumed by humans. In 2009, with the help of my sister, Julia Cohen, and other artists, activists, scientists, musicians, leaders, and friends, we founded Plastic Pollution Coalition to dispel the myth and euphemisms such as marine debris, litter, garbage, rubbish, waste, and instead to call it what it is. If it's plastic in the ocean, if it's plastic in the environment, it's plastic pollution. And our goal was ambitious at the time, a plastic pollution-free world. Together, we heard from experts and learned that plastic contains a multitude of endocrine-disrupting chemicals, particularly estrogen mimickers, which leads us to the why of my mission. When I was 13, our mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, which was estrogen receptive, meaning that it could have been caused by environmental factors or chemicals that she was exposed to. And when I was 17 years old, our mom passed away. She was 43 years old at the time. And I found myself facing issues that impacted every aspect of my life, and in a greater sense, all life on the planet. As our crucial work continued, I began to see the stark and obvious connection between the extractive industries, extraction, production, consumption, use, and disposal of plastic, and the burgeoning crisis of climate change and how those were connected to each other. The first ingredient in all plastic is oil. The petrochemical industry uses about 12 million barrels of oil a year to produce plastics. The extraction, the processes, and shipping of oil generate significant carbon pollution, releasing greenhouse gases. During processing, plasticizing chemicals like bisphenols and phthalates are added, which pollute the frontline and fenceline communities living close to or in proximity of these plants. It's also been linked to spikes in cancer, lung disease, asthma, hormone receptive diseases, learning disabilities, fertility issues, the list goes on. The petrochemical industry and the pollution it creates disproportionately harm people of color and low-income communities and indigenous communities. Every year, the United States alone burns or buries in landfill 32 million tons of plastic, impacting the health, wealth, and the well-being of frontline and fence-line communities. The U.S. also produces the most plastic waste per capita of any country and exports much of this waste to the global south. An astounding 91% of plastic is never recycled. 350 million metric tons of plastic are produced globally each year, and 15 million metric tons wind up as plastic waste in the world's oceans. So, what can we do? How can we work together to change systems for a healthier and more just planet? Earlier this month, the historic U.S. federal Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act was reintroduced in Congress. The Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act of 2021 builds on successes of statewide laws across the country and outlines practical plastic reduction strategies to realize a healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable future. You can send a letter to your members of Congress asking them to support this legislation by visiting our website at plasticpollutioncoalition.org. Today, 12 years after the founding of Plastic Pollution Coalition, we act as a broad tent for organizations, businesses, and individuals to join together, change business as usual, and support policy and legislation to stop plastic pollution. Today, we have thousands of members in 75 countries, all working for a healthier, more just, and equitable world. We invite you to join us. As Ryonosuke Satoru wisely said, individually, we are a drop. Together, an ocean.
Thank you, Dr. Benjamin and Dianna. Thank you for sharing your wisdom on COVID, on plastic pollution, and your guidance. I certainly am signed up for your coalition, and I hope others listening are joining it as well. It really is time to break free from the plastic pollution. And thank you all of us for joining today. You too can share the wisdom that you've heard, share the guidance. You can share it in the Action Center using the chat, or share your thoughts and quotes in social media using the hashtag ACLS 2021. And please do share your thoughts on the sessions through the feedback survey the Eco America team is pushing out in the chat. Next, we're going to hear about two very important solutions: climate law and climate policy. We're hearing a lot about climate solutions today, and now we're going to be treated to the latest updates and wisdoms from experts in the field. You know, not all who are tuning in today have the same flow of climate information. And so we have invited two leaders to share us on a bit deeper level the current outlook and latest information on climate and law and climate policy. Please join me in welcoming back Abigail Dillen of Earthjustice, who you heard this morning, who will discuss key legal strategies for climate action, and Leah Stokes of UC Santa Barbara, who will shine a light on climate policy.
Hi, I'm Abby Dillen. I'm the president of Earthjustice, and we use the law to make change. We represent over 600 clients, always free of charge, in cases of many kinds, to protect and restore the health of our communities, our ecosystems, to advance climate solutions that can secure our future and also make our lives so much better. You may have seen our tagline, which is "Because the Earth Needs a Good Lawyer." And I want to talk about not only the role that good lawyers can play, but the role of strong laws and fair courts as we address our climate emergency. When you look at the movements that have delivered the most profound change in this country, you can see the role of public interest lawsuits and the courts in desegregating the country, in opening the workplace to women, in achieving marriage equality, among other examples. As we seek to deliver social change on an unprecedented scale in an unprecedented time frame, We need to make sure that the courthouse doors stay open to public interest litigants as we strengthen our laws to meet the challenges that we face now. Let me be clear about the kind of social change I'm contemplating. It is a transition from an extractive fossil fuels-based economy to a regenerative clean energy economy that leaves no community behind. And it is not only that, it is also the unfinished work of liberating our society from racism and inequality that make climate change land the hardest on communities of color, low-income communities, and that are racism and inequality that are in fact driving climate change. It's no accident that climate pollution flows through the Cancer Alley of Louisiana, through the port cities of California and Texas that are also communities of color, through Appalachia, through Indian country, where more and more oil pipelines are proposed and where oil is flowing illegally through the Dakota Access Pipeline. Our courts will not be the only solution, but they are particularly well suited to push back on the dynamics that have made it so hard to make progress on climate in the United States. And that is number one, disinformation. No other country in the world has the kind of long-running debate over the existence of climate change that we do. But in the courts, facts matter. No matter who you are, you cannot make headway on your arguments if they are not grounded in credible evidence and sound science. Number two, money and politics. The raw power and influence of the fossil fuels industry has often derailed political progress on climate. But in the courts, that kind of power and influence has much less sway. And when we represent clients from big national environmental groups and health groups whose names you probably know, to tribes, to small community-based groups, we can go up against the most powerful interests from the federal government to big multinational corporations, and we can win when we have the law and the facts on our side. And that is very powerful. And it's powerful in part because our laws are strong, not only in their substance, but in the procedural rights they afford to participate in making the rules that govern our economy, in being able to hold our government to account when it falls short of what the law requires, in our ability to stand in the shoes of the government in the routine instance where political will runs short, resources run short, and the government fails to enforce the laws against polluters. These are strong powers that give us a platform to create systemic change and spur climate action. And I think for that very reason, the previous administration made it a first-order priority to dismantle these environmental laws and to appoint judges who were picked because they oppose government regulation and, importantly, access to the courts for public interest litigants. Our ability to make change in the courts is constantly under attack, but we are not hesitating to make all the headway that we can there. And let me talk about very generally some of the ways that we do that. The first is stopping investments in big new fossil fuels projects. These are often permitted in ways that run afoul of our environmental laws. And when we can force a more thoughtful process where people can become informed, we can build both political will to make better decisions and also give investors time to rethink their commitment to projects that will almost certainly become stranded assets. We can also make carbon polluters bear their own costs. Carbon polluters are often just polluters across the board. They poison our air, our water, often dispose of toxic waste irresponsibly. There are laws against that. And when we can bring those laws to bear, we force dirty industries to pay to clean up. They start internalizing the costs that they have been imposing on us, on our health, our well-being, on our climate. And as they do that, they become less economically competitive with cleaner alternatives. And that's the story of coal-fired power in this country can no longer compete with clean energy once it has been forced to clean up through a massive national litigation campaign. And that brings me to the third amazing opportunity that is already well underway, and that is a state-by-state litigation strategy to shift our energy mix in real time. All of us are captive to monopoly utilities, and the deal they make with us, we have to get our power from them, is to make sure that our electricity is as affordable as it can be. The decisions about how to source our power, meet energy demand, are made in many trials at our public utility commissions, where as customers, we are guaranteed the right to participate. And we can go into those proceedings now and win the case for clean energy because we can prove as a pocketbook matter that investing in old coal plants, building big new gas plants is more expensive than fully clean energy portfolios. And those are just the kind of portfolios that we are advancing in, of course, the leader states like New York and California, but also in the heart of coal country, Michigan, Indiana, in the heart of oil and gas country, Arizona, New Mexico, and in the places where liquefied natural gas, LNG, is looking for a foothold, Puerto Rico, Hawaii. Wherever we see rules that are really made to perpetuate business as usual and discriminate against the new clean energy players and other purveyors of climate solutions, there's usually law to apply against that kind of market discrimination. And we can go in and clear the path for the businesses that provide the climate solutions for us now and in the future. And last and most important, we can go to court to make our strong laws apply with even greater force in the communities that have too long borne the brunt of fossil fuels pollution, most often communities of color. We have laws moving in Congress that could really be game changers and strengthen our hand. The Environmental Justice for All Act, get to know it, get behind it. And more broadly, my ask to you is that we keep protecting and strengthening the laws that can drive the right kind of sea change as our climate deadlines loom. Push back on the escalating efforts to close the courthouse doors to the kind of public interest lawsuits that have delivered change in this country so reliably over the last 100 years, and demand the appointment of even-handed judges that respect science and the role of government in addressing our intertwined crises of climate change and systemic injustice.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Stokes, and I'm a professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where I work on climate and energy policy. I'm also on the advisory board of Evergreen Action, or an organization I've been working with to try to advance Biden's American Jobs Plan. So today I'm going to talk about what is in the American Jobs Plan, and really what is the progress that we can expect to be making if we're so lucky to get this plan passed in Congress. So the first things to know is that this is a plan to invest resources that will really pay us back in terms of jobs, pollution reduction, health benefits, and of course, climate stability. The plan is to spend something between $2 and $3 billion, $2 and $3 trillion on infrastructure and jobs. And there's key components to the plan that the White House put out at the end of March, including spending of $600 billion on the transportation sector, $500 billion on the power sector, $200 billion on affordable housing, and of course, important research and development investment of $180 billion. Now, many groups have said this is not big enough. We need to be spending between $4 and $10 trillion to really get on top of our infrastructure needs, restart the economy, and of course, address the climate crisis. And ultimately, what's going to happen is that Congress is going to set the scale of spending. So what the White House has said so far is an opening bid, and we're going to have to see how this story develops as Congress takes it up. So what are some of the policies in the American Jobs Plan? Well, there's my personal favorite, which is what I'm going to talk about for most of this talk, which is the Clean Electricity Standard. But there's also 10-year extensions of really important tax credits that have fueled renewable energy, including the investment tax credit and the production tax credit. And one of the ideas is to turn them into a direct pay mechanism. What does that mean? It means that you don't have to have federal tax liability in order to be building wind and solar and getting support from the federal government. That's really important because some utilities that are nonprofits often don't have any financial taxes owed to the federal government, and so it makes it harder for them to develop wind and solar. We need everybody across society to be able to be participating. There's also a very important justice provision, which is that 40% of the benefits of these investments need to be going to disadvantaged communities. For too long, our climate, energy, infrastructure spending has been leaving behind Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, and we can't let that happen anymore. And the Biden-Harris administration has been really clear that they are taking up that challenge and making sure that everybody is brought forward in this infrastructure package. Of course, there's really big investments in transportation on everything from electric vehicles to public transit. Something I'm very passionate about is also building electrification investments. So right now you're probably using a gas stove for cooking, and your heating and hot water is probably also gas. This is a fossil fuel, and it actually creates really significant indoor air pollution. And so what we need to do is turn over that building stock and retrofit a lot of buildings. It also proposes to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies, and I could go on and on and on. But this is a short talk, and I want to talk about the clean electricity standard. So we got to move on here. So what is a clean electricity standard? It is a requirement. It is a standard that says we will increase our clean electricity by a certain amount by a deadline. So right now we're at 40% clean power. And what the plan is, according to Biden's really important and historic leadership, is to get to 100% clean by 2035. And directly on the road from 40% clean today to 100% clean in 2035, you will pass 80% clean in 2030. And that's a really important number because it's possible that this American Jobs Plan will move through a process called budget reconciliation, which has a 10-year budget window, which means that we need to be targeting that 80% clean by 2030. That's also important because a lot of folks say it's going to be really hard to get those last 10 to 20% of the grid cleaned up. And so let's focus on what's doable today. Let's try to double our clean power and get from 40% clean today to 80% clean in 2030. That's what's doable. That's what we can get done. Now, keep in mind that a clean electricity standard is not a new idea. It's a policy that's been proven in states, whether that was the renewable portfolio standard that came before it or the clean electricity standard that is in place today. And already more than 1 in 3 Americans live in a place, whether that's a state or a city, that is targeting 100% clean electricity. So this isn't a new idea. It's just a really bold idea that President Biden has to say, let's do that clean electricity even faster, and let's do it everywhere across this country. So can Congress do this? Absolutely. You could, of course, do it through a bipartisan way by passing a clean electricity standard through regular order. But so far, the Republicans don't seem to want to cooperate on this really important issue. So it could also be done by getting rid of the filibuster, but Senator Manchin has said that that's not something that he's interested in. So we're likely to see this proceed through budget reconciliation. And the fact is that we know we can do a clean electricity standard through budget reconciliation. And if you're interested in understanding how, I wrote a report with Evergreen Action and Data for Progress called A Roadmap to 100% Clean Electricity. And you can just go to evergreenaction.com/100clean and download that report. But the really big point, which even Secretary Granholm has said most recently, is that we can get this done through budget reconciliation. So there's no excuses. We can act now. And keep in mind that we don't even have to wait for new legislation to get started. The Biden administration has a lot of existing authority under legislation like the Clean Air Act to say, hey, we're going to start cleaning up pollution. We're going to start making progress for clean electricity. And so that needs to also happen. So you might say, okay, clean electricity standard, you're so excited about it, Leah, but why should I be excited about it? Well, this is a really critical policy that will get us from 40% clean today to 80% clean in 2030. A lot of people are more familiar with the tax credits because they've been around for decades and a lot of companies know how to use them. However, a clean electricity standard is going to add a whole bunch of extra energy into our system to really help us get where we need to go. What modeling suggests is that if we just do the tax credits, we'll maybe get from 40% today to maybe 56%, 60% by 2030. that's not enough. That's only halfway to our 80% target. So we need that clean electricity standard to get us 80% clean by 2030. And in addition, deliver massive pollution reductions. That's 86% reductions in carbon dioxide, 93% reduction in sulfur dioxide, and 76% reduction in nitrous oxides. And now we don't even know yet, because we don't have the modeling done, about mercury and particulate matter. The fact is, the health benefits from this policy alone will pay itself back. This is an investment not only in jobs, not only in clean electricity, but really in clean air and in our healthcare across this country. Now, why is clean electricity so important? Why am I so fixated on this thing? Well, let me give you a little bit of math to help you see what clean electricity can do. If we have a clean electricity system and we combine that with electrification through things like electrifying our transportation sector, through electric vehicles, electrifying our homes, through induction stoves and heat pumps, we can actually get about 75% of our economy-wide carbon pollution eliminated. How does that work? Well, we're going to take electricity, which is right now at about 28%, and we're going to zero that out. We're going to take transportation, it's at 28%, and we're going to shrink that massively, maybe only 5% of current or 2005 emissions. We're going to take heavy industry, we're going to cut those emissions in half. We're going to take buildings, and we're going to zero out that pollution. And taken together, this clean electricity plus electrification pathway gets us that 75% pollution reduction. I'll tell you one more thing, which is our friends at Data for Progress have been polling this idea for months, and they consistently find strong majorities of support. We're talking more than 60% support nationwide and high support amongst Democrats of 82%. This is particularly a popular idea amongst Black and Latinx communities because these are the communities on the front lines of pollution. So a clean electricity standard is part of American Jobs Plan that President Biden has introduced. It's a really big idea, and it can solve a lot of our problems, not just climate change, but also pollution and job creation. So let's get this done this year.
Thank you, Abigail. Thank you, Leah. You've given us so much to think about, be inspired for, fight for. I don't know about you all listening, but I think I'll be binge watching these sessions when they go up on YouTube next week. So stay tuned for those and look out for them to be posted on the Eco America YouTube channel early next week. Now we're going to move from the what on climate and solutions to a bit of the who. When you visualize climate activists, what images come to mind? When you think about climate action, is it mostly on the national scale? We hope the next two speakers will open your mind to broaden that visualization, including bringing climate action down to the hyper-local level and engaging conservatives for climate solutions. And yes, you heard me right, conservatives. Here to talk about hyper-local climate solutions is Dave Dijak, a friend and partner from the National Environmental Health Association, and here to tell us about the good news on engaging conservatives on climate change is Benji Backer from the American Conservation Coalition. Welcome, David. Welcome, Benji. It's going to take a broader and more diverse constituency of Americans to engage on climate to ensure the solutions we need. And so we look forward to your guidance.
Are you aware that you have a small army of guardian angels that ensure the health, safety, and financial security of you and your family? No, I'm not describing some metaphysical spiritual beings. You know what I'm describing? I am describing an almost invisible cadre of professionals made up of actual humans. Think about it. As you watch this video, you are most likely in the comfort of your home or your office. The air all around you is filtered and tempered for your health and comfort. How does that happen? If you are like almost everybody else, when you woke up this morning, you made a beeline to the bathroom where you turned on the tap to brush your teeth and wash your face. Ever wonder why that water never seems to make you sick? From the bathroom to the kitchen, your morning breakfast is generally free from organisms, from chemicals, from toxins that might harm you. How does that happen? And how about that trip to your local favorite restaurant or your local food truck? I have my own favorite one in Washington, D.C., but that's my secret. How is it we can go and patronize those places and never seem to get sick from a meal that we eat out? Do you ever go to the beach? That's one of my favorite activities. Your local spa or swimming pool. How about a ride in an airplane? How about the safety of your local playground? How is it we can just go do those things, visit those places, and enjoy those moments and not worry about getting sick or harmed from that experience? Most communities in the United States are blessed to have environmental health specialists, highly trained and educated professionals working in their local government. That's why those places are safe. You might not see these people, but trust me, they are there. They are there inspecting and assessing your local restaurant. They are scrutinizing daycare facilities. They are assessing elementary schools and playgrounds, ensuring that you and your family don't have to worry about harm from those places that bring so much meaning to your lives. And the truth is, our lives, my life, your life, are being harmed by climate change as we now speak. My name is David Dijak, Executive Director of the National Environmental Health Association, and I have the privilege of leading the association which represents those guardian angels. Those guardian angels are adapting and reorienting themselves to escort us to a safer, healthier, and more secure future during this era of climate change. Much as they ensure your tap water is safe, they are actively engaged in events to combat the worst of climate change. They assure your home is safe to reoccupy after flooding, as we have witnessed in recent years throughout the Mississippi River drainage system. They manage conditions to protect public health during wildfires, as we have seen throughout the western United States. They assess the relatively recent phenomenon of harmful algal blooms that blight our local beaches, as we have witnessed in places like Florida and Ohio. And yes, when a polar vortex causes staggering damage to residential infrastructure throughout Texas, it was our members who were there to guide a worried public in their decision-making. Governmental environmental health professionals are employed in all 8 uniformed services, all 50 states, and most of the U.S. territories. They represent a quietly competent profession. They are highly educated, modestly compensated public servants. They possess the knowledge, skills, and experience to address some of the most complex climate change issues. You know what? You probably saw them when you received your COVID vaccine, but you didn't recognize them. But trust me, they are there. I ask a favor of you this morning. Search them out. Get to know them. They are a national treasure and essential asset in our effort to create a vibrant future. Because in the end, you know what? There is truth to the cliche. And that cliche is that all of us are smarter than one of us.
Well, hello, my name is Benji Backer, and let me address the elephant in the room right away. I'm the elephant in the room. I'm a conservative Republican who happens to also be a climate activist. Get it? Conservative Republican, elephants, okay. Never mind. Well, I might be one of the only people you've ever heard from on the right talk about climate change, but I'm here to tell you why it is so important for you and anybody who is left of center, independent, or right of center to engage with the right of center on conservative climate change policies and working across ideological differences to make that happen. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Wisconsin, a lifelong conservative activist, and if you can tell by my baby face, I happen to be not that old. I'm 23 years old, but I started politics on the conservative side of things, being active when I was 10 years old, knocking doors and making phone calls for candidates in the state of Wisconsin, obviously a purple state. I also grew up in an entrepreneurial family that was fiscally conservative but incredibly environmentally conscious. We'd go on hikes as a family, we'd go out to the multitude of lakes that are in Wisconsin, and that really instilled a love of the environment with me growing up. And I'm going to circle back to why that is so important in a few minutes, but that really shaped why I care so much about this issue today, was being exposed to it as a young kid. But I also happen to be a conservative activist, and I became increasingly frustrated with the lack of conservative leadership on the environment and climate change. And also, as I'm about to talk about, I'm not alone, and I want to go into that in a few minutes as well. I run the American Conservation Coalition, which is the largest conservative environmental organization in the country. And in fact, if you couldn't tell from my background, I am in a hotel room in Austin, Texas, where I'm touring around the country, fully vaccinated, to see different communities of our activists taking action in their locality. And so this week we're in Austin, as well as some other Texas cities, and across the country, we have been doing incredible work building up a grassroots movement of moderates and right-of-center individuals that want to take pragmatic, bipartisan action on climate change. Okay, enough about my organization and enough about me, but wait, I do have one more thing. I also happened to be a climate denier in my past. I was surrounded by a lot of Tea Party folks growing up in the conservative activist movement, and was convinced that because I was surrounded by climate denial, that was the reality, even though I care deeply about the environment. So, why that matters in the context of my conversation with you today is because I have an understanding of where a lot of conservatives come from, especially in older generations that happen to be skeptical of the science around climate change. But I've spent the last 5 years dedicated to climate action and starting this organization, but I also have years of experience understanding where deniers and skeptics come from. So let's start there. Where does the skepticism come from? Well, I think that question is important to answer if we are going to engage with conservatives, which again is something that I will talk a lot about today. But you have to be able to answer that question if you're going to engage with conservatives who might be skeptical, and even those who aren't. So where does the skepticism come from on the right? Well, quickly, I want to explain where it does. In the early 1990s, over 90% of Americans considered themselves environmentalists. Today, that number just is over half of the American populace. So it's almost decreased by half since the early 1990s. And that's largely because this conversation and the climate deniers that often fall into the category of not calling themselves environmentalists or climate change activists have felt like this issue doesn't represent their morals and their values. In fact, back in 2014, there was a study done by the Duke University, which showed that 36% of Republicans believed in climate change at that time. But when they were presented with a free market or market-based or limited government solution to climate change, that number of belief in climate change almost doubled to 70%. So it went from 36 to 70% of Republicans who believed in climate change when there was a policy that fit within their values. So it goes back to what I was trying to say before, which is that the skepticism of climate change or the denial of climate change largely comes from a disconnect between the science and the policy and the science and the policy of the right versus the left. And that the left has oftentimes dominated this conversation and the right has not liked those policies, therefore has denied climate change. Additionally, that has allowed a snowball effect to continue, not the Senator James Inhofe type, but a snowball effect of people who have not liked the left of center approaches becoming more and more entrenched in denialism, just like I was surrounded by it in my early teens. So that's important to understand because it breaks down the barrier of a lot of people thinking that conservatives just don't care about the environment or don't care about carbon emissions or pollution because they're skeptical of climate change. A lot of people think that way, but in fact, I think that the important takeaway from what I just said is that there's a way to engage with conservatives who care about the environment, but just maybe don't like what the left of center has proposed. But before we get into how we can engage those conservatives, which is something that, again, I've worked on over the past 5 years on climate change, I also want to talk about why it's so important to engage conservatives on this topic. The reality is climate change is a global issue that is going to be solved by people of all political stripes. We cannot wait for the perfect political situation to solve climate change. This is going to take decades to fix, decades to reverse, decades to let my generation have a brighter future. We cannot just have the left of center in this country or across the globe engaged on the topic. And the reality is there is no reversing climate change without conservative leadership. And thankfully, we can do that. But conservatives care a lot more than you think, which is, again, going back to my point of, my last point of why it's important to engage conservatives. They do care a lot more than you might think. There's a generational divide, sure. Young people like myself, young conservatives, do care a lot more. In fact, over 90% of young conservatives have said, according to our polling, that they want answers on climate change and they want their party to do more. But almost all conservatives have a track record of being more eco-friendly in their day-to-day lives than literally any other type of person in the United States. That was a different study that was done by a few universities out east, including Michigan. And there's an opportunity to engage those skeptics who might care more about the environment than you think. So not only is it important to engage them because we can't do it without them, but they also have a deep love for the environment that just hasn't been tapped into in the past couple of decades. Another reason why it's so important to engage conservatives is that most solutions in this country and across the globe that have been the best for society or best for our environment have come when there were common sense in the middle, common sense heads in the middle working out the solutions. So as a climate change movement, we need to figure out how to put those common sense leaders from the middle in this country, on the right and the left, together to find the most comprehensive solutions. So what does that look like? How can we re-engage those conservatives who are older and might be more skeptical, or younger and very excited about climate change, like the movement we're building at ACC? Well, we need to make it about values that conservatives care about. If you make it about something that conservatives don't care about, it's going to be harder to engage them. So what does that look like? I have three important pillars that I think are vital to engaging conservatives. The first is making climate change local and tangible. What do people care about? Their backyards. They care about their local community, putting food on their tables, their culture, etc. We need to work on incremental progress on those communities and not a one-size-fits-all policy that might rope them into a box that they don't want to be in. We need to end the urban-rural divide and allow local and tangible action to reign supreme, while also understanding the importance of federal and international action. That will take a return to making climate change a local and tangible issue. The second is economics. We need to make climate change about economics, which conservatives care a lot about. Job creation, American energy independence and competition, and make it about the climate change's economic impact and how we can fight climate change in an economically strong way. If we can make it about that, conservatives will want to be engaged. The last way that we should engage conservatives is through optimism. Alarmism and pessimism has not worked for conservatives, nor does attacking their industries or their geographical regions. Instead, we should be focusing on the optimism, the optimistic opportunities that exist economically, and building a brighter future for our grandchildren, as well as our children here in the near-term future, and how America and the globe will benefit from fighting this global challenge. So, to conclude, we only had 10 minutes to talk about why it's so important to engage with conservatives on climate change, what that looks like, and why we even are here in the first place. But I'm hopeful that after this you have a better understanding of where conservatives are coming from, how we can engage with them, how important it is to engage with them, and how the future of climate change starts with us all. And I hope that you'll join our movement, ACC, as well as the incredible movement that's being created here today to make climate change bipartisan again. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Benji, and thank you, David. Thanks to all of the Hot Topic speakers for giving us so much to think about and act on. I'm certainly going to be taking Benji's guidance. I have a very conservative family, so I'll be taking his cues and implementing them immediately. So speaking of acting on climate, next up is our advocacy and collective action session, local action, national purpose, and it'll be hosted by me. I'm looking forward to our next conversation coming up right after we hear some news from our summit partners. And while you're watching, be sure to move around and stretch as you're able. We're in the final stretch of the day, so see you in a few minutes.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the American Climate Leadership Summit. I, as the Director for Climate for Health at EcoAmerica, I'm here to guide you through just a few minutes of stretches so that we can take time for ourselves and our bodies as we're here listening to the great speakers and panels during the summit. So we're going to start just by taking a deep cleansing breath. In and out. Great. And then we're going to start with small circles with your nose, one way. And then the other way. Great. And then we're going to take our arms. You can do this sitting or standing. I'm going to start with my right arm. You can start with whichever arm you'd like. Right arm, palm out, grab it with your other hand, stretch. It's a nice forearm stretch for all that time we spend on the computer typing away, being productive. But it's also a time that it's important to take some time to be productive in other ways and take a stretch and make sure we're caring for ourselves. Great. And switch. Nice forearm stretch. Should feel really good. Great. And then we're going to switch from our forearm to our upper arm. So cross one arm over. Hold with the other arm. You should feel a nice stretch in the upper arm there. I'm going to use the most technical of terms in our stretch break, upper arm. Great. And then switch. And you don't have to do a lot of, you can let gravity do a lot of the work here. You can you don't have to pull too much. Gravity is a heck of a force. Just kind of, let your arm not do too much. Great. And then we're going to go over, one arm over, grab it, catch your elbow with the other arm. This one's nice for posture and sort of your upper back area. Great. And switch. Great. And we're going to end by putting out your arms like this and little circles one way and little circles another way. My arms look. There we go. That's more even. Great. We're going to end by meeting in the middle. Take a deep cleansing breath. And let any of your worries go away as you breathe out. When you breathe in, you really feel the lift in your shoulders. And when you breathe out, you feel them melting down. And now we're going to hear from some of our American Climate Leadership sponsors and then back to the programming. Thanks.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Robbie Ann Mackin, Chief Development Officer at EcoAmerica. Welcome to the American Climate Leadership Summit. This year, the lineup is exciting with over 100 of EcoAmerica's partners participating and over 80 impressive presenters sharing their expertise and representing a wide range of geographies, organizations, and sectors. I'd like to extend a special thank you to partners and supporters, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes, for their tireless work to make this summit relevant and inspiring. We could not do this without you. For those of you who don't know EcoAmerica well, our mission is to build climate leadership in America. We support over 100 trusted institutions like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Baptist Church, and National League of Cities as they center climate change in their work. They don't join us, we join them. Our Climate for Health, Blessed Tomorrow, and Path to Positive Communities programs offer customized climate ambassador trainings, research resources, and guides so they can catalyze climate action among their members and stakeholders. There are over 35 million Americans who are very concerned about climate change, but for the most part, no one is asking them or helping them address the issue. Through our partners, we have unique reach into these communities and sectors. We inspire and enable a broader diversity of Americans to identify on a personal level with climate change and then act and advocate for solutions. We embed justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in all of our work, and yet we recognize that we can and must do more to make climate justice and equity real and correct past injustice. Please collaborate with us to continue building a powerful, positive movement of climate action and climate solutions. Check out the resources on ecoamerica.org and subscribe to our newsletters. Follow us at EcoAmerica on social media for the latest resources and details about our weekly Let's Talk Climate webcast and more. If you are interested in becoming a climate ambassador or would like additional information about encouraging your community or group into climate action and advocacy, reach out and we'd be happy to help. Thank you and have a great day.
The science is clear. Climate change is real. It is happening today, and it profoundly affects our health. We are experiencing more intense heat waves, droughts, and wildfires. Climate change increases the amount of airborne pollutants and results in higher ozone levels, leading to higher rates of asthma and cardiovascular disease. APHA's long-term vision is to create the healthiest nation in one generation, and addressing the health impacts of climate change is a critical step. We need your help. Please join us.
Welcome back. It's great to be here today virtually with Jackie, Lynn, and Rob. I've been looking forward to this discussion. As many of you know, EcoAmerica works to broaden and diversify public support, political resolve, and collective action on climate. And our programs, including Climate for Health, Path to Positive for local communities, and Blessed Tomorrow and Faith, aim to do all three. We know that visible national leadership on climate is critical. And thankfully, we have renewed leadership on the national and international stage. But we also know the rubber meets the road at the local level, and this is where our greatest opportunities lie. So here to talk about local action and national purpose on climate, it's particularly around solutions, are Jackie DuPont-Walker from the African Methodist Episcopal Church and also EcoAmerica board member, Dr. Lynn Goldman of the Milken Institute School of Public Health at George Washington University, and Rob Mower from the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. Welcome again, Jackie, Lynn, and Rob. You're all working to catalyze climate action and advocacy at all levels. And you're coming at this issue from some different perspectives and constituencies. Jackie, you're working with the faith community, the AME Church, approaching climate for the most part as a justice issue, as you discussed so powerfully this morning. Lynn, you work in public health, where you see the devastating impacts of climate change and pollution and what it has on our health, including disproportionately on already vulnerable populations, including communities of color. And Rob, in an area, and you work in an area of your state and our country that is mostly politically conservative, and you're normalizing climate conversation and action and making progress on solutions. So well done.
We're trying.
Well, and despite some differences, you do have all one thing in common, which is you're taking a people-centric approach to climate. In other words, you're making the issue of climate change more personally relevant to those that you serve. And so EcoAmerica is just so grateful to be working with all of you and collaborating with all of you. So let's hear more about your work. And perhaps let's start with Lynn. Talk to us about what you're doing in the health community on climate change. I think you're doing quite a bit. So for everyone who's listening's sake, I think if we had 5 hours, it wouldn't be enough to give Lynn to talk about all she's doing. But please, Lynn, try to share your top line of the work you're doing with the health community.
Well, thank you, Megan. And this is something I've been committed to for a long time, not only because of my passion about public health and making the world a healthier place for all of us, but also because of being a pediatrician and the strong commitment I have to the health and well-being of children, not only today, but for the future, and how I feel that climate is mortgaging our children's future. So this has been a longstanding passion that I've had, and I've lived through the whole era when people used to actually argue about what should we be doing? Should we be mitigating climate, reducing the emissions, or should we be, adapting? And what we know now is that we need to do both things, and that often we can do both things at the same time. And I think that that's where I really want to focus my work. And as a dean and the head of a public health school that's committed to social justice as part of our mission, but also to sustainability, we felt we needed to start at home, at the university. How do we reflect that? In the reality of how we operate. And one way we did that when it came time to put up our a building for the public health school, that needed to be a place that reflected sustainability in all ways, but especially climate and how we use energy, but frankly also water, and the fact that people know that of Washington, D.C. as being kind of a swampy place. It's not all a swamp, really, but that water is an important issue. That that and the design of a building, you can capture the water, or you can create a hard surface that just puts off the water into the environment in a way that makes it dirtier. So it's hard, Megan, because when you start to proceed down a path like that, you have a lot of people who say it's going to cost too much. We can't afford the LED lights. Why do the stairs need to go all the way to the top? But we want people to use the stairs. It's better for their health, and it's more efficient in terms of energy. We have been working now across the country through the National Academy of Medicine to develop, if you may, practices that can be used by many, in the healthcare arena, because the healthcare enterprise itself, not just public health, uses a lot of energy, is not very sustainable. And we've always said, as long as we're doing a good thing for people, we're taking care of you, it doesn't matter how we're using energy. But that's not true. Our footprint on the environment is very important, and we can take care of health and healthcare and have a smaller footprint at the same time. So I think another thing I've learned is that we need to have alliances. We need to work locally, but we need to have alliances to help us to do that work better. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Len. And you hosted our summit a few years ago when we were able to be in person. And I will say that the building, that your green building that you have, is not only healthy, it's beautiful. I mean, it's a joy to be in that building. So there's just so many win-wins that folks don't always hear about of going green. So thank you for your leadership in that, and for hosting us. So we hope to visit there sometime soon, and when we can get all back in person again.
I look forward to that day that we can all get together again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Rob, you've had a busy couple of years working to bring climate action into being in Southwest Florida. As I mentioned, a heavily conservative populated part of the state. So tell us about what you've been working on.
Well, you challenged us to say inspiring stories and practical guidance, Megan, so I'll try and keep those in mind in these comments. So my inspiring story is it all started with a sea turtle hatchling. Why? Because I saw a picture. And it basically said this: what's going to happen when this sea turtle hatchling returns in 25 years and the beach from which it originated from is no longer there? This really struck me because we have a sea turtle research monitoring program that we've been running for 30 years. In fact, it's one of the longest running monitoring programs in the country. And I'm thinking, so 30 years of effort could just go out the window because there could be no home for these sea turtle hatchlings to crawl up onto if sea level rise just continues because of climate change. So those are the sorts of moments that sort of really grab you when you think you're working for a conservation organization. And of course, like all nonprofit leaders, your plate is full, right? There's never room to take on another thing. But how do you take on the challenge of climate change? We're a regional conservation organization, but a few things connected the dots for us and inspired us to really get involved in this space, which we had historically not been involved. And one of them was the sea turtles, and another one was invasive species. I'm sure all of you have read National Geographic or watched Discovery Channel. We have a big problem with invasive species in Florida. And guess what invasive species love more than almost anything else? Hot weather. And guess what? We're getting a lot more longer and hotter years, as you all know. And we have a research program to eliminate and remove humanely Burmese pythons. Burmese pythons are literally eating their way through the Everglades, eating everything in their path. And so, again, there's another climate connection. And then the third huge connection for us was Hurricane Irma. Southwest Florida took Hurricane Irma right on the chin, Category 3/4 storm, direct hit. And we'd been through a lot of hurricanes before, but what was remarkable about Irma, as we continue to see over and over again, was the unexpected rapid intensification of the storm beyond anyone's expectations. We dodged a bullet. We got hit hard, but we were supposed to get a 15-foot storm surge right through Naples. At the last minute, the storm wobbled off about 2 miles. Had it kept its track, Naples, Florida would have been out of business for 2 years, basically. Think of every nonprofit, every hospital, every business. And that was the linchpin of this for us, is that we have to stop thinking about climate change as an environmental issue and all the divisions that creates with a conservative community. And we had to start talking about it as a community issue. This is about the survivability, the well-being, and future of our community. So what we did is, instead of going it alone, we reached out to the 2 community foundations that work in our region, Megan, and we said, we need to position this as a community issue. This is about health. This is about economic well-being. This is about the future viability for our kids. If they're going to inherit our house, is that house going to be a viable asset for them to live in 25 and 35 years? And so those were all the series of events and pivots that really got us active into the space as a regional conservation organization. And I'm really happy to say that Eco America provided some invaluable guidance and support, because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. Like some of you that have been in this space for many years, we were sort of new into the space of climate change and climate policy. But we're catching up and we're learning from our peers. And I will say, just to end on this note of how do we work in a very conservative area, we were very fortunate to have Congressman Francis Rooney represent the district for 4 years. Some of you may remember he was one of the few Republicans talking science and climate change in panel hearings and science hearings in Washington, D.C., and he came from our district. So having a powerful Republican who believed in climate change was an immense boost at the time we were launching our effort. And now you start to see the Florida State Legislature, which understands that in order to keep the Republican majorities that they enjoy today, young Republicans believe that climate change is an issue that requires action. And so that's what I hold on to, is that we need to talk community, not just environment, and we need to engage and address the language of conservatives, but we can do that in a smart way without compromising our principles. And so that's sort of some of the principles we've been trying to follow.
Absolutely, Rob. And leadership matters so much. And we had the privilege of working with you on some research too, that showed that so many of the folks in your community were concerned about climate. I think you were even surprised at some of the results, that it was an overwhelming number of folks were concerned about the issue, and we're tying it also to the health of your mangroves and worried about the red tides and all sorts of things that were happening at the time.
Yeah, we often say here that never let a good crisis go to waste. And so Hurricane Irma was the one crisis, and right on the tail of Hurricane Irma, we had the longest red tide event in Florida's coastal history. That has a lot of health impacts, by the way, because it's a health issue as well. But thirdly, we had these huge algae blooms that happened on the east and west coast of Florida that resulted in massive fish kills, human health, pet health issues, and that really got people breaking down barriers between thinking of health, economy, community, and well-being. Because guess what? A warm bathtub, if you leave it in your house in Florida in the summer and turn the air conditioning off, it breeds algae. The Gulf of Mexico is the same way. So the warmer our planet, the warmer our Gulf of Mexico. We know it's supercharged hot now. It feeds storms, but it also contributes to these algae blooms. And the algae blooms are now a #1 concern for businesses in Florida.
That's right, because businesses were shut down because people didn't want to be next to that. So thank you for sharing that, Rob.
Of course.
Jackie, tell us, over to you now. Tell us, what can you share with us about what the African Methodist Episcopal Church is known as AME is doing on climate change?
Thank you, Megan. For me, this is a Sankofa moment. And the Sankofa bird is a symbol in African culture of looking back as a way to go forward. And so in our most recent U.S. National Climate Assessment Report, there was both affirmation and confirmation of the fact that climate change disproportionately impacts marginalized, vulnerable, and disadvantaged populations of all races, cultures, and nations. The question that came to mind about the voices of conscience in our time, and what would they have said? What would Dr. King have said concerning climate change? What were Nelson Mandela's thoughts? What would Ida B. Wells, Rosa Parks, and Shirley Chisholm have said? What will Vashti McKenzie say? She's still amongst them. Well, Ida B. Wells traveled the nation, and in her speeches about injustice, she also mentioned the fact that she was nursing her baby. And it was so important to her that she not stop as a nursing mother. She said, if this work can contribute in any way toward proving this, at the same time arouse the conscience of the American people who demand for justice to every citizen and punishment by law of the lawless, I shall feel I have done my race a service. And one of my sheroes is Rosa Parks, who was a quiet giant whose actions spoke for her. And she reminds us that one person can make a difference. Although most of the Blacks or coloreds at that time in the 1950s thought they could not change their conditions, Rosa Parks believed she could help change the way she and her race were treated. And most importantly, she had the courage to act on that conviction. Something she said I'll always remember is, I know why I'm here, and with God, I will fulfill my purpose. Shirley Chisholm, we all remember, is the first Black woman to serve in Congress in the U.S., and she was also the first African-American woman candidate to run for the presidency. Her commitment to the political reform served as an invaluable representation of people of color in this country. Her image spoke for all women. Although the U.S. is still yet to have a woman president, the presence of women in the political arena is a powerful statement regarding the ongoing fight for gender equity. She said, I am unbought and unbossed. And in 2005, just before her death, she said she wanted to be remembered as a woman who dared to be a catalyst for change. And indeed, not only she, but all of them were. Now, Vashti McKenzie represented our church first on the Equal America Board. And she is the first woman to be elected a bishop in the AME Church. And that was not until 2000, and we were founded in 1816. She uses as her motto, a person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, and is nothing. Only a person who risks is free. Jim Clyburn, we like to quote, we know him in today's world as the one who changed the fate of the Biden campaign, but he's an AMEer. And he says that environmental protection doesn't happen in a vacuum. You can't separate the impact on the environment from the impact on our families and communities. Then he goes further and says we have a moral responsibility to protect the earth and ensure that our children and grandchildren have a healthy and sustainable environment in which to live. Now to my story. It's about a race that I lost, and I'm glad about it. There was a man you might know named Bob Perkowitz, and he started Cohen. And I put him off. I sent him to my schedule. I did everything I could, but he kept coming back. So finally, I had to meet with Bob Perkowitz. And I heard the story, and I saw his passion, and I knew his commitment because he had endured all kinds of obstacles for that meeting. Out of that meeting, we made a commitment on behalf of the AME Church to become a part of the Eco America Network. And that took me to Blessed Tomorrow. Blessed Tomorrow worked with us and said, how do we get this message to our church? We serve in communities where other issues are deemed to be more important than climate change. That while climate change is important, what's more important is how I'm going to survive today and how I'm going to plan for my family. So we decided that a video was needed. And that video had the trusted voices from our church. We got bishops, lay leaders, people from the U.S. and the continent of Africa and the Caribbean, to actually talk about what they were doing and how climate change impacted them. We heard about how our Sunday school teachers in Zambia and Zimbabwe had written Sunday school literature, and that meant they were ahead of us in grooming the next generation to take the baton in this work. We knew that we had to get buy-in. It wasn't going to work just to have a proclamation from the boardroom. So we gathered the video for our general conference, which meets every 4 years, with 3,000 delegates from around the world. It played at a time when people would be exhausted and they'd be just talking because they had to talk. It was the worst time in our deliberation. I thought, why are they giving me this time? The video played, and I will tell you, the 3,000 delegates had a hushed response. You could see and feel they understood what was going on. But that meant we were going to have a seat at the table. And so that resolution at the 50th quadrennial session in 2016, which was a celebration of the 200th anniversary of our church, said, and used the scripture from Genesis and John, whereas Jesus commanded us to do love one another, and God has given us responsibility for the good creation. And we went on to all the things that we know, that climate change impacts us disproportionately, that our children and elders are suffering with asthma because of environmental injustices. We know that we needed to be more energy efficient. We understood that in Africa, it's a very livelihood. In the Caribbean, it is a floodplains impacted. That here in the U.S. even, that in rural America, we had higher proportions of the population being very vulnerable. We knew that something had to be done, and so we vowed that we would be a part of this movement, that we would make sure there was literacy about the environmental movement in our congregations and wherever we are. Now, this Social Action Commission that I have the opportunity to be the leader of calls out issues and concerns. Then we try to help the local congregations, the regional bodies that we call presiding elder districts and Episcopal districts to serve and to find ways to do ministry. Our International Health Commission has taken this on. They have developed guidelines, they have monthly meetings, they invite local health commissions and practitioners to come, and they absolutely help develop toolkits. They develop videos, they develop lessons that people can use in dealing with climate change and telling that story in all kinds of ways. And in fact, it's now translated into all of the languages that our publications are. In the cold climate areas, they're doing the work to help churches and people's homes become more energy efficient and be better stewards, we like to say, of our treasures, our time, and our talents. That action is taking place. In the warmer climates, we're looking at the impact and how we can actually work in tandem with other faith groups. The Social Action Commission is supporting and introducing and critiquing public policy. And whenever we hear there is legislation, we try to get involved and encourage our congregations in those areas to be involved. What is hot right now is electrification. That is a major agenda in most urban areas, and affordable access to charging stations, especially in public spaces. In many of our communities, that is an issue. And so the public utility requirements are very important to us as we serve in low wealth communities, and many of our churches are there. Our Christian education department has developed curricula, and they're teaching us how to do the elevator pitches. And that's very important. How do you have that very quick statement to get attention? And this is a part of empowering our communities. On the public policy arena, we are proud to say there were 5. We just lost Congressman Alcee Hastings, but 4 congresspersons who we stay in tune with. I quoted one, Jim Clyburn. We also have Gregory Meeks, Terry Sewell, and Val Demings. We stay in contact with them. There are 27 self-identified self-legislators and countless other local officials, plus commissioners, judges, and others who help to shape policy. What's important for us is that ministry is local, and that's where it has impact. And we try to get that word out. And more than anything else, they look to our international body to have a statement that is actionable. So this is what we say: increasing climate ambitions while managing COVID-19 pandemic and other plagues and isms is a challenge to all countries. Here in the U.S., one more time, equity must be our priority. PPE disposal is being discussed with vibrancy, yet no imminent solution to long-standing challenges are on the horizon. It is time for us to insist that the residuals of human discarding, That means loss of livelihood, loss of living space, loss of life, and loss of hope. Saving the planet must be directly tied to how we save our people. And we are proud and will challenge and be a part of this movement called Echo America that can be the hope peddler because it has messages that bind us all together. So we look and remember that civil rights and thriving economy can coexist. Discrimination and just transition are not compatible. Discrimination is a form of racism. And help me in reminding the National Council of Churches that in 2018, they got it right. Yes, tell the National Council Chair, John Dorhauer of the United Church of Christ, and his director, Jim Winkler, that they must stay the course and end racism now. Anti-racism and democracy must coexist. We agree, most folks say. So what is the dilemma? Our priority must be clear. Our past tells us that equity must be the order of the day, yes, first. And we know that when we clear the air of racism, the earth will breathe. Finally, the AME Church's legacy must be real, authentic, and credible. In this Sankofa moment, we remember when it was said by our predecessors, working with the poor and disenfranchised is not an addendum to an already crowded agenda. It must be the very essence of who we are and what we must be about. And on our watch, so it is, and so it will be.
And so it will be. Jackie, no stone left unturned. I know you're involved in so many different issues, and the way you're bringing them together in purpose is amazing, and so much for us to learn from. So thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to go now to Q&A. Remember, all of you who are listening, be sure to use the Action Center to submit or vote up questions for our speakers so I can ask them live on air here. And hopefully we'll have time to answer all of them. So I have one question I'm going to ask first, which is kind of a multi-question. You guys all kind of hinted at this, but I want to ask you, what hurdles have you encountered in your work? What have you done to address them? What guidance do you have for attendees who face similar hurdles? We know that our paths are not necessarily linear on this issue, and it's not 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, right? So, Rob, maybe we'll start with you. What are some of the hurdles you faced?
Well, we launched our initiative on March 20th of last year. Need I say more? The entire region shut down, of course, about 2 days later because of COVID. And so we had this kickoff meeting scheduled with about 60 key stakeholders. And we really try to be careful on that stakeholder engagement. We Southwest Florida has a terrible history of failure at regional initiatives. We have these, we're not anchored by one large city. It's not like there's Miami and everything else around it. We have some of the poorest communities in the United States juxtaposed against some of the wealthiest, Immokalee versus Naples. You have Lehigh Acres versus Fort Myers. And so we tried to get a diverse representation to come to the meeting. And building trust early on was really important, but COVID really sort of stopped us in our tracks for about 2 months. But then the great pivot happened. Innovative thinkers don't let obstacles stop them. And our team basically decided to just move forward, pivot, go online. And so we did a lot of our education engagement online. Another huge accomplishment, despite the very conservative area that we're in, is we supported the university down here in developing the Southwest Florida Resiliency Compact. No one thought it was going to be possible. I can tell you a month ago, 2 of the biggest counties were on the sidelines and were not going to sign on. As of today, all 14 are signed on. And it's an immense, sort of sense that where your thoughts are, there you shall be also. So if you're sort of committed to the outcome, you just don't accept that you're not going to succeed in this. And the team believed in that, and we supported the team at FGCU, the regional university, and they got this done last week. They got the last holdout county, Collier County, to sign on to agreeing to work together. I mean, it's a first step. It's not a revolutionary step to address injustices, inequalities, or all the environmental stewardship work that we need to do. But it's a beginning, right? It's a platform, it's a place where we begin. So I think COVID and getting everyone mobilized during COVID, for us, since we were just starting out in the last year publicly, was singularly the largest obstacle that we faced. Money's always the second one, but we can overcome that.
Absolutely. Lynn, how about you? What obstacles have you faced?
I think one of the major obstacles that I have seen is that of lack of empowerment, that moving people from talk to action and making it meaningful to take action within their community, whether that community is your local community or your community of hospitals or whatever your community is, that you can make a difference. And because it's such an enormous problem and it requires the effort of so many people. And I think it's very important for people to feel that they have concrete ways to engage, that they can make a difference, and again, not just talk about it. And of course, in my community, there are many people who have been talking about the issues, but moving beyond that to actually rolling up our sleeves and doing something about it, and setting an example, which is what I heard from Jacqueline as well. How they are doing that. I think it's extremely important.
Lynn, just tagging what you just said, we could really use you down here, because the other obstacle with COVID was one of our biggest goals was getting the health sector engaged in a new initiative. Well, they weren't talking to anyone except dealing with the crisis unfolding before them. And so that remains a challenge. So your national leadership, your example is going to be very important in local areas so that we can overcome the COVID fatigue that these hospitals and health systems have been so focused on.
I think the institutions might be in one place, but I will tell you what I'm seeing in terms of the professionals, the doctors, the nurses are becoming very passionate about this issue. And part of it motivated by the same concern that I bring to the table, which is their children, and thinking about what the legacy is we're leaving for the next generation, that we're asking them to fix something that we're not willing to step in and try to fix. I mean, that would be like, I never cleaned my house, for 30 years and expect my daughter eventually to clean that whole thing up. And, we have to get started on that work. And I think many doctors and nurses who I'm in touch with feel very passionate about that. I'd be happy to come to Florida and talk to them too about it. Robert, love to do that.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Jackie, you've done so much. It's hard to see that there are obstacles there, but it seems to me you've hurdled over many of them.
I think that Robin and Lynn touched on them. I think, one, you heard me talk about the hushed voices when we read the resolution and when we got the unanimous vote. What we are missing are the resources to match the energy that is now there. And during the pandemic, as we were quarantined and self-isolating, and people had time to think about what was important, I know coming out of this will be even a greater demand for the resources. So the ambassador program that will come out is a good one. But since we serve so many low wealth communities, our ambassador program will include of necessity people who don't have the wealth of time. And so we will have to find some compensation for them in order to do the work that needs to be done. While everyone sees the end result and benefit, we don't necessarily have all the arms and legs and skateboards and cars in order to get things done. So that is one of our greatest challenges. The other is to messenger it in ways that people can hear it in the midst of all of the other challenges in life. And so the first video was wonderful. Now that we can do the kind of smartphone messaging, we're challenged to try to keep that messaging fresh and alive. And to get our younger people engaged, because we really do need to pass this baton. They need to catch the vision, and that means even evangelizing and getting young people who are in the movement to come in and help the other young people who may be more inclined toward church business. That is extremely important. So for us, it is the awakening and having the resources to move forward and get it done.
Absolutely. And you were also very involved in the Get Out the Vote effort as well. I know you seem to be working around the clock. And of course, that's another way for folks to make their voice heard and take action on the issue is through their civic duty.
Absolutely. Thanks for connecting that dot. It was 94/7 for us, not 24, 94/7. We expanded the day to make sure it happened. And that is what we need in our messaging here. And it was so much that relates to what we're talking about. And as people can see the link, I tell you, the coronavirus helped us really see the globe as one ball. And that's so important.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask a question now from the audience. And again, for those of you listening, feel free to chat in your questions, vote them up. This one got voted up. Jackie, Lynn, Rob, you're respectively in health, faith, and communities, but how can you, from your different places, actually coalesce and work across sectors for local climate action? I think we've already started to have some ideas with Rob inviting Lynn to come down and speak. What other ideas do you have?
I think for us, we've always been multi-sector, right? We felt, we sort of did a very complex grid. And, it wasn't just about grass, initiatives tend to focus on power brokers and initiative leaders. We wanted to make sure we had grass tops and grassroots. So that was sort of one thing that was really important. We needed people working at the community level to be engaged from the get-go. And the last thing we wanted was to miss them on the front end of an invitation to a kickoff meeting. So we really thought a lot about not just diversity of sectors, but the levels of involvement. So that was very, very important as sort of we designed our engagement efforts. And, I think that needs to just continue. We have to continue to engage all sectors. Part of it is we have to get, people are zoomed out. We've sort of maxed out the educational commitment from Zoom presentations. I think people are ready for action. And right now, our next big step is to design, I think we'll probably call it the Southwest Florida Climate Challenge. But we need to inspire and unleash ingenuity, passion, a competitive spirit, which is such an important part of this country. And we need to get people being innovative and thinking and doing and letting other people see and then celebrate those successes. And so, we can solve some of these really thorny issues with a lot of ingenuity. We saw it during COVID. People were making respirators and turning them out, not out of multi-billion-dollar companies, but out of very small factories, just with innovation and ingenuity. So I think for us, that's going to be the next big play, is we need to get people from different sectors to use the language that attracts each sector, but bring them together for action focused, where they can celebrate. And by doing that, they can meet their own commitments to their own churches, their own communities, and their own companies. Because, as has been said a few times today, everyone sort of buys in principle that this is important, but we need to move beyond talk, and we have to get to the action, and we have to focus on action that'll be meaningful.
I think I hinted at it because if you think of who comes to church, virtually or otherwise, the sectors are all there. And if you think about the messaging that we're challenged to take out when we leave, we're actually spreading out everywhere. But even beyond those who gather, one of the things that we do is to try to say where the likely partners, given where the energy is going to be placed. And I'll give an example of what we're doing here, where I am in Los Angeles, in my local area. We are called the homeless capital of the world, not the U.S., but the world. And we are trying as much as we can to do what we can, even as the courts are saying it is not enough. So one of the things that we're doing is we're setting in place something that will bring in persons who are next to the railroad tracks, next to the rail, next under the bridges, at the highways, near the major thoroughfares. It won't be a shelter. It will give 3 to 5 years for someone to stay in. The we is not just the group that I had, Ward Economic Development Corporation. It's all the people in that community who, every time we pass someone under a tent or plywood that's been constructed into a house, our hearts are broken. In those 3 to 5 years, we're inviting people of all walks of life to come in and help those people have a life plan. What is it you want to do? Where are the social workers? Where are the health workers? Where are the vocational schools? Where are the colleges? How can they go? We have a vision that some people can actually come in and leave that place that we're calling King Solomon Village and go and buy a home. They don't have to go through transitional living and others. So working within a sector doesn't really fit who we are. If I didn't describe that before, let me describe it now. We are cross-sector by our very nature. And much of what we do is not only proactive, but it's responsive to what people see and come to us as a trusted voice to speak out and to take action. We don't always move as fast as I think we ought to, but you can't force people to be where they need to be. You have to show them why it's important to be there. And so if you're anywhere near an AME church, knock on the door, leave a note, challenge them, stand up in the middle of the worship service and say, I heard you all about this, and make us be who we say we are.
Megan, if I may, I think that the kind of collaboration that you're hearing about here and that we need to do, much like where we are right now with science in so many areas, if we even want to understand how climate impacts health, we have to bring people together. Even, others may say they're all scientists. Well, they're not. They're from very different disciplines. They don't necessarily know how to work together. And you have to learn each other's language. You have to learn how to listen to each other. And you have to learn how to share power, how to share leadership. And I think conferences like this are incredibly helpful because there aren't very many settings where, I, as a health expert, have a chance to spend time with somebody from AME and hearing about her perspective, or from somebody like Robert and hearing about his work. And frankly, I also appreciate the health of turtles, and I appreciate, because I don't want the turtles to be homeless, but I don't want the people in LA to be homeless either. But to think about the different organizations that are working in this area, how could we be collaborating in a way that is more powerful than what we can do individually? Meetings just like this, I think, are incredibly important, even to just begin that process by being able to understand each other's language.
Well, and a common thread that I'm hearing from you is that you're not waiting for other people to bring you opportunities. You're actually creating them yourselves. And I think so often folks say, what do I do? What do I do? And they're looking for someone to kind of hand them an opportunity to engage. And the reality is there's so much we can do just ourselves. And we have, as I said earlier, we all have more power than we think, And so it's like the adage, if you see something, say something. It's like, if you see something, do something, right? You can do something, even on your block, in your neighborhood, no matter where you live. And just as long as it's authentic to where you are and the community you live in, it just creates that energy that more people want to be part of. All right.
One thing I was going to add, Megan, is just on that point would be, look, COVID has been an incredibly disruptor event. That's sort of, we call these events, where there's tsunami, hurricanes, these are disrupting events. And the opportunity here, I really think, and I see it at the local level, is that everyone knows we're not going back to the old way. That's gone. The question is, what are we going to emerge into as we emerge out of this? And that's the opportunity. I mean, just think, the number one contributor to climate change in Southwest Florida is the transportation sector. We have knocked back those greenhouse gas emissions dramatically just by staying at home and not getting our cars and driving every day. And we're also not clogging up the roads. Less pedestrians are being hit in car accidents, and less cyclists are being driven off the road. So, if we look at this disruptive event as an opportunity event combined with the other forces happening in our country right now, there could be new models that would be much more sustainable models, much more equitable models. And I think that's what we have to drive towards.
Yeah, it's interesting because when Clarence Anthony was speaking earlier, he's saying that mayors show their priorities with budgets, right? And so there's so much we can be doing. We can learn from this COVID event, like you said, that we marshal resources in a lot of different directions. And so how do we even work at the hyper-local, level to have our mayors even show their priorities with the budgets. And certainly speaking of money, both, you've all talked about how the lack of resources have been a hurdle for you in one way or another. And one of our attendees asked this question, how can we motivate people to move their resources to where they are needed? Really from the haves to the have less, as our attendees. What is your advice for inspiring the investment in this issue?
I'll start on this one, Megan. I do think we need to make the case for the impacts of climate on both health, but also economies, the widening of disparities, both health and economic disparities in communities, and as well as the extreme vulnerability in especially coastal areas, but also in areas that are prone to fires and the health impacts and the economic impacts of those fires. These connections are becoming more obvious, but it is not true yet that people who control funding completely have embraced this as a priority. And I think we still have a lot of work to do in getting the word out. I would add another thing, which is that I think we have an administration and a Congress that is likely to want to address infrastructure. And I'm not at all actually optimistic that necessarily the lessons have been learned about, abandoning some of the old ways of doing things that have been destructive to the environment, destructive to health. It could be there'll be a temptation to get in there and build more roads and make more areas automobile friendly. And I think it's extremely important within our communities that we are interacting with the people who represent us in Washington about what kind of infrastructure is going to make our communities healthier, safer, provide housing, provide economic opportunity, and reduce pollution, including the climate pollution in our communities. And what kind of infrastructure does the opposite? And because this is something that can cut in both directions, and I think it could be a fabulous opportunity, and it could also be a wasted opportunity.
I want to jump in and agree with Lynn 150%, and to add that one of the things I've learned about messaging is that it takes 37 hits to get attention and 7 more to get action. So while I came up in a context where you made an announcement and you expected someone to write it down, calendar it, and not come back except show up and maybe one reminder, that is just not today's world. And I think our movement needs to be that place where every opportunity we have, we hit the message. And once we hear the message coming back at us from the listener, then we know we have hit home. And so much of what is happening now, at least for me and us, I'm speaking up in places where maybe someone would say there is not a likely tie. I happen to sit on the LA Metro Board. Our responsibility is transportation. When I joined the board in 2013, transportation was about the bus and the rail. Now transportation is about affordable housing. It is about the environment. It is about wage disparity. It is about small business development. We understand that everything is interconnected. So I think for us, it is whatever God puts on our mind at the moment that we need to speak up about the environmental movement, climate change, disparities, environmental justice. We need to add it to the conversation so that it becomes a natural for people to understand. And as frequently as we do, then it becomes a piece. Robert, I'm from Tallahassee, so I applaud you for what you're doing where you are. I think you're not the most conservative section of the state. I think I'm from the
Yes, that's probably true. We're both, but the forces we face are similar. And to answer your question, Megan, I think yes. So I'm an opportunist, right? I think positive outcomes, but I'm a realist as well. And I think for us in Southwest Florida, at least, I have to be able to translate this into the cost of inaction, right? What happens if we don't build resilience? What if we don't start getting, what I try and tell people, we call our initiative Path to Positive, because we just don't want to be telling a negative story all the time. That tends to drop off on the attention sphere. I sort of tell people that, look, we can do this. But we have to start right now. we cannot push this down any further. And we need to be talking about economic dollars. That's the only way I'm going to get a county commissioner's attention, unfortunately, in Southwest Florida. I can talk about Florida panthers and turtles until water quality. But when I talk about economic dollars that we have at stake, if you look at our strip of coast, which is among the wealthiest areas in the United States, you're talking, tens of billions of dollars of real estate assets at risk. I have to use those statistics and language to get people's attention. Then I can talk about the inland. I can talk about the cost, the human toll of, for example, in very poor housing in Immokalee, that are in flood areas, right? They're built in flood areas. Well, indoor allergies is a giant issue. This is a huge problem. Every time it's flooded, you have mold inside the house. Who's doing the remediation? But if I start with that with the county commissioners, I get nowhere. So I start where I know I can get their attention, and then we try and get the conversation and dialogue going into a broader framework.
Rob, I'm going to challenge you not to be a realist, but to be a visionist.
I like that.
Realists have those limits, but you painted a vision for them.
I agree. I hear the vision too. It's coming through. But I guess that to be a visionary who knows how to come across as a realist when you're dealing with county council and others like that, that is a real art, Robert. So.
It takes a village, is all I'll say. And if I thought I knew everything up at this point in my career, anyone who thinks they know anything right, run away from them as fast as you can. So I appreciate the perspective in the council of those that have frankly been involved in this longer than us. We're just starting out, but we're going to do what we can.
Yeah, I just found a number of times when I'm in a space where I know there's not a lot of agreement, or maybe no agreement, that I suspect. And I tell a story that's put on my heart and in my spirit. It has never failed to find one person who can be converted to it because it triggers something in their life. And we don't know where someone sits and how we face them and the hats we think we wear is really not the whole person. Mm-hmm. So I think for the person who asked that question, always seize that moment, because you never know where the ally is waiting, where you will touch the nerve, where you will touch the memory, and you will have an ally to the message you're trying to convey.
Wow. So we've got passion, we've got vision, we have tenacity. I mean, it takes tenacity to work on this issue. As Jackie said, if someone doesn't respond to you the first time, keep trying. Make sure you are being the one to help people show up. If you are as passionate about this issue as I know you all are, because you're here, it's really finding that energy, finding that positive energy to keep it going. Rob, there's a lot of questions coming in from folks who want to know what conservatives think about various bills and Green New Deals, but I'm not sure I'm going to put you on the spot on that unless you want to talk about it. But
no, I can give a quick blush of how we deal with the Florida legislature and bills coming through. I mean, I think there's a big pushback. Unfortunately, there's still this division of extreme polarization of Democrat and Republicans and how they perceive the solutions to climate change. The good thing is, the way I see it, is at least we're talking about climate change. Even if the solution suite is different, that's way ahead of where we were 7 years ago, I can tell you. So politically, this state has moved. And the fact that you have a climate change bill with funding dollars actually going through the Florida legislature is a small miracle in of itself, okay? So that is progress. And that is what it speaks to is political reality. The reality is, if Republican leaders in Florida are looking to the future, they've done their polling, right? They know that young Republicans care a great deal about this issue. The solution suite might look different than a young Democrat club, but I think nonetheless, at least we're talking about action, we're talking about solutions, we're talking about investment. And I think, what we have to do is start with where we are and then push aggressively forward. So the fact that we've got, $1 billion bill going through the Florida legislature to invest into climate resiliency and adaptation, not as much on mitigation as I would like, but it's a start. And so that's where we have to start. And I think we can be ambitious. And the other thing is Republicans tend to favor regional efforts over government-focused efforts and big government. You've heard that so many times. And so what we've done as a region is not in a reaction to what we believe that's right or wrong, but the pragmatic reality is we were waiting for the state for 10 years and it was doing nothing. That is what generated us to create a regional compact and get the local governments, the coalition of the willing, so to speak, and we knew the others would come along, and they have. So that's sort of our approach has been focus on what we can do and focus on the philosophies that are here and then lead people down. If it's regional action that we can get done, let's get the regional action done.
Is that bill impacting the entire state?
That bill will impact the 100 states. $100 million minimums a year through grant programs. Unfortunately, I think a lot of it is going to go towards resiliency planning, which is important. Of course, we need to look more at our transportation sectors, but we did successfully kill off the bill to add 3 new mega transportation corridors in Florida because the state can't afford them now. And so small victories, right? You got to take them any way you can sometimes.
And I raised that, but to the earlier question, this is a time when if you in another setting, and I will do it because I'm in this setting, offer that the AME Church, I'd like to put you in contact with the AME Church in Florida. So they
would absolutely love that because communities of faith we see as huge agents of change and an underused agent of change in Southwest Florida.
Fantastic. Well, see, this is the collaboration that's already starting to happen.
Absolutely.
Everyone wants to connect with each other, which is fantastic. So I want to thank you, Jackie, Lynn, Rob, for being here today, for sharing all the powerful work you're doing, for sharing, the hurdles that you're facing and really being real, because all of us need to hear the journey that everyone's on so that we can learn from it, that we can expect, there will be some bumps in the road, but then to still have that courage and the vision and the passion and the tenacity to work through them. So thank you for sharing that. I know it isn't always easy, but I'm sure we all agree it's really rewarding to do this work. For myself, I couldn't imagine doing any other work. It's just so important for us to use as much as possible our hands, our voices, our feet, our heart, or really our whole selves to bring other people into climate action and move towards more ambitious and just and equitable solutions fast.
Well, thank you to Eco America for your leadership, because I'll tell you, when we were starting out, we wanted to be a smart follower. We did not want to reinvent the wheel. We really learned from all of your initiatives and are proud to partner with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks to my colleagues, too. I'm honored to serve with you, and I'm a novice compared to what you have both accomplished, but looking forward to following up on your offers of assistance. Thank you.
Today is no accident. We've come together for a reason. We will ultimately and inextricably be bound going forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you. You are incredibly eloquent, Jackie and Lynn. Thank you.
And I as well admire both of you, your courage, and especially Megan used the word, but I think you illustrate it. Thank you very much. It's inspiring.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
There's so much each of us can do and act on climate. And as I've said, we are each more powerful than we think. So join me in finding something as simple as something you can do every day. You can tweet, you can share the latest report on climate, you can talk to a neighbor about conserving energy. And in fact, I don't know if you know, that's as much as 30% of solution. You could do something just like supporting clean energy choice in your community. As Jackie mentioned, talking about climate in your house of worship, or going to your local AME and inviting them to join you in acting on climate. There are 1,000 ways you can act locally on climate and spread national purpose. It's just so important to advocate, to use your voice, and to do it now, even if you're new to this movement. And in fact, Eco America, we're going to help you do that today. We're going to give you a head start. So join me, Eco America, hundreds of local, national leaders, dozens of organizations, a growing number of Americans nationwide, and sign on to the Momentous commitment. Momentous is a commitment, a statement, and a campaign. People who sign are calling for policymakers to have emissions each decade going forward, restore thriving nature, center justice in transformative ways, as we heard earlier. And it's a commitment to move towards these goals, whether you sign for yourself or for your whole organization, to do it yourself. You can find more information about Momentous by following the links the Eco America team is sharing. And we'll be planning on a training session and some advocacy action for Momentous signatories for the summer. So if you sign up today, make sure that you're included in that flow of information, and certainly invite others to sign on as well. I'm also pleased to announce that Eco America is creating a private online community launching this summer. So just like you saw on this past panel, there's folks across the nation who want to find each other, who want to work together. And so what we're doing is creating an opt-in online community where you can do just that. You can connect with other like-minded people within your sector or across sector. You can share and glean best practices, make announcements, have impromptu meetings, share your events, and really simply be in conversation with each other. And certainly you'll be able to control how you engage with the community. So if you're interested in joining, fill out the form that Eco America team is putting into the chat, and we'll get back to you as soon as the community goes live. So next up, we're going to hear about some of our latest research from Eco America about health, jobs, and climate. Then Rebecca Rear is going to treat us to a bit of advocacy training from our ambassador training program. After that, we're going to be hearing from Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who will be our closing keynote. And that will all be right after these words from our partners.
Hi, I'm Annie Fett-Cruz, Director of Blessed Tomorrow, a program of Eco America. We're developed by people of faith for people of faith to advance climate solutions as a moral imperative in communities across the U.S. Blessed Tomorrow offers ideas, tools, language that are both familiar and compelling for a faith audience. And through Blessed Tomorrow, faith leaders and institutions work to reach 100% clean energy, to engage their broader communities, and to pursue equitable solutions that address environmental injustices and benefit all of us, but all while maintaining the distinct voice of those faith traditions. We partner with many faiths and faith organizations and reach more than 57 million congregants in over 85,000 congregations. We provide them tailored strategy, guidance, training, and resources, such as our Moving Forward Guide, our Let's Talk Climate Guide, and the Blessed Tomorrow Ambassador Program. All of these can be found for free on blessedtomorrow.org. So we know now is the most urgent time for our action, and we must care for all of the created world. And faith communities can play an important role in reaching these common goals. So I invite you, please join us and check out the resources on blessedtomorrow.org. Make sure you subscribe to our blog and newsletter, and like and follow Blessed Tomorrow on social media for all of the latest resources and details about our monthly Let's Talk Climate webcast, the ambassador trainings, and more. So remember, we're here to support you and your faithful climate leadership, and I want to say thank you.
Everyone, my name is David Dijak, Executive Director of the National Environmental Health Association. I live in rural Southern Maryland, where the natural rhythms of life are punctuated by the arrival and the departure of ospreys, of purple martins, and monarch butterflies. I want you to know that our 6,500 members work hard every day to ensure that most important parts of your life, your family's health, safety, and financial security are protected and promoted. Together, we can usher our communities into a prosperous and healthy future where the rhythms of life can be sustained for future generations.